If you want your colored pencil art to look vibrant and realistic just like this, then join me as I share with you all of my top tips for creating gorgeous realism with colored pencils. I'll be using Prismacolor Premier colored pencils to create this artwork, but the techniques that I'll show you will work with any artist quality colored pencil brand. You'll want to watch all the way to the end of this video so that you can see my entire drawing process unfold. The first thing you want to do when you start a new colored pencil drawing is lightly establish the values. Value refers to how light or dark a color is. So your darkest values will be the shadow areas, and your lightest values will be the highlights. The colors in between are your midtones. I like to start by establishing my darkest values first. So I look for the darkest areas in my reference image and very lightly fill those in. If you're finding it difficult to understand the values in your reference image, it can really help to desaturate the image and look at it in grayscale. You can do this using any image editing software on your phone, tablet, or computer. When drawing realism with colored pencils, you want to choose shadow colors that match your reference image. So for example, I started out by using dioxazine purple hue in the center, and then violet blue, and then Tuscan red and poppy red as I worked my way outwards, changing the colored pencil depending on what colors I saw in the reference image. When you establish your darkest values first, you're laying down the groundwork for the entire drawing. You might be surprised at how quickly the artwork starts coming to life just from drawing in the shadows. Once the shadows are established, you can start working on the midtones. In this drawing, the midtones are the really vibrant, saturated colors. There are also quite a few highlights on my reference image. These will be the brightest parts of my drawing, so I'm just going to let the white of my paper show through in these areas. This means that as I'm establishing the midtones, I must be very careful to leave blank space for the highlights. If you're working on toned paper or colored paper, then you can choose to use a white colored pencil or other light colored pencils to create your highlights. But when you're working on white paper like I am, it makes sense to just be aware of the location of the highlights and color around them. One of the most important tips in this entire video is to use extremely light pressure as you lay down your colors, especially when you're in the beginning stages of your drawing. Pressing lightly allows you to build up your shadows and colors gradually, which is key to creating smooth, subtle blends and gorgeous gradients with colored pencils, both of which are important factors when creating realism. To help maintain light pressure when using colored pencils, many artists prefer to hold their pencil far back on the barrel and use the long edge of their super sharp pencil to lay down light layers. But I've been using colored pencils since the late 1900s, so I have a lot of practice with pressing very lightly without needing to hold my pencil that far back. So I gently grip my pencil a lot closer to the tip, which allows me to easily adjust the amount of pressure that's needed. When it comes to the best way to hold your colored pencil, it really boils down to personal preference. There is no one single best way, so do what feels best for you, whatever feels most comfortable in your hand and allows you to achieve the look that you want with your colored pencil artwork. Now let's talk about a few reasons why it's so important at this stage to press lightly with your colored pencils. The main reason is that when you press lightly, it allows you to add many more layers on top. If you've worked with colored pencils before, then you know that your paper can only handle a limited number of colored pencil layers before the tooth of the paper gets flattened and the surface of the paper becomes slick and slippery, and when that happens, you can't add any more layers of colored pencil on top. Tooth refers to the tiny bumps in the paper that the colored pencil particles adhere to. In general, a toothy paper is one that has high or coarse tooth, so it feels rougher to the touch, while a paper with low tooth feels smooth. If you use a rough paper, then your artwork will typically look more textured because the colored pencil pigments won't sink into the deeper crevices unless you use a solvent or press really hard. For this drawing, I want the final artwork to be as smooth as possible without the paper texture showing through. To help me easily achieve this look, I chose to use Strathmore Smooth Bristol paper. Since I'm using really light pressure, I can easily apply around a dozen layers of colored pencils on top of one another, even though this is a smooth paper with not much tooth. Another reason why you should use light pressure is because pressing too hard can leave indentations on the paper, and when you try to color over the indentations later, the colored pencil will glide over the indentation without depositing any pigment there. Indenting your paper on purpose is actually one way that artists create texture, such as fur or hair, but we don't need that kind of texture in this drawing, so our aim is to color very lightly to make the artwork as smooth as possible. All this talk about using light pressure leads us directly to our next colored pencil tip for realism. Glazing is the process of applying thin, transparent layers of color on top of one another. Colored pencils are a transparent medium, which means that when you press lightly, you can still see the colors underneath. So as you layer your colors, they mix together, slightly changing the color underneath. By layering different colors on top of one another, you can deepen the colors, lighten the colors, darken the colors, and change the colors. Through this layering process, you can create gradual transitions from one hue to another hue, or go from light to shadow. The concept of glazing goes back for centuries. Oil painters commonly use glazing techniques to apply thin layers of oil paint on top of previously applied colors on the canvas. That's exactly the same concept as I'm doing here, except with colored pencils. Glazing with colored pencils is a slow process, but it's also a very satisfying one. This technique is perfect for getting in the flow of making art. It's both enjoyable and challenging, so it keeps your mind engaged just enough that you can easily get lost in the process and lose track of time in a good way. When you're glazing with your colored pencils, in the beginning stages, your artwork will look rather pale. It's tempting to want to press hard to increase the saturation, but the results will be much more realistic if we build up the saturation slowly by lightly adding more and more layers of different colors through glazing. As you add more light layers of color, you will notice at some point that the tooth of your paper is starting to disappear, and the surface of your paper is becoming smooth. This is a sign that you've reached the burnishing stage. Burnishing is a technique that's often described as pressing hard, either with a colorless blender pencil, or a white colored pencil, or a light colored pencil that complements the colors underneath. Burnishing is often the final stage of creating a colored pencil drawing. Pressing hard unites the colors underneath and reduces or eliminates the amount of paper color that shows through. But in doing so, it destroys the final layer of the paper's tooth, so you often can't add any more colors on top. Typically, people have to press hard in order to burnish, but because I've added so many layers of different colors in this drawing, by the time the paper starts to run out of tooth, indicating that it's time to burnish, I actually don't have to press too hard at all. I definitely use more of a medium pressure than a hard pressure. Sometimes people struggle with burnishing because it can really hurt your hand when you're pressing so hard, especially on a large artwork. But for me, even though I spent 8 hours coloring in this rainbow rose, at no point did my hand or wrist hurt from coloring. So if you have to press really hard in order to burnish, that means you don't have enough layers of colored pencils underneath. When you do have enough layers, then burnishing kind of happens naturally. Getting to this stage takes a lot of time, practice, and patience, so I suggest you relax and enjoy the process, because colored pencils are the perfect medium for getting into the creative flow. But if you're in a hurry and you want to speed up the process and blend your colored pencils more quickly, then you could blend by using solvents, though that's something that we won't be covering in this specific video. If you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please tap the like button, because that lets me know that you enjoy this kind of content, and it encourages me to make more videos like this for you. And be sure to subscribe to my channel to see more of my art tips, techniques, and tutorials. As I color in this rainbow rose, you might notice that I never use a black colored pencil at all in this entire rose, even for the deepest shadows. That's because black is a deadening color. It looks really unnatural. So if you're trying to create realistic art, especially of a natural object like a rose, then you should either avoid using black altogether or use it minimally. If you do want to use black, it's best to apply it lightly, and then layer another color or two or more on top of it, which helps make the black look more natural and fit in better with the colors around it. Instead of using black, you can layer a variety of dark colors on top of one another to create the darker tones, as I did in my shadow areas on this rainbow rose. Some great dark colors to experiment with in the Prismacolor range are dioxazine purple hue, black grape, black raspberry, black cherry, violet blue, dark brown, or dark umber. You can start with one or more of these as your base layer to establish your shadows, and then layer more colors on top to match your reference image. Speaking of colors, Creating a color chart is one of the most helpful things you can do, especially when you're new to colored pencils, or if you have a lot of colored pencils in your collection. A color chart helps you see all of the colors that you have at a glance, so you can easily compare them and quickly grab the right color for each part of your drawing. I created this custom color chart to help me organize the colors in Prismacolor's biggest set of 150 colored pencils. For each color swatch, I burnished on the left side and then gradually used lighter and lighter pressure to fade out to the white of the paper on the right side. This way, I can better see how the colors look at different levels of transparency. If you think my custom Prismacolor color chart might be helpful to you, I've posted a link below this video where you can download a blank version, so you can print it out and color it in. Throughout this video, you might have noticed that sometimes there's a small translucent piece of paper underneath my hand. Its purpose is to reduce the amount of oil or dirt from my hand that might transfer onto my drawing paper, and also reduces any smudging. I'm using a piece of parchment paper from a kitchen roll, but you could also use glazing for this, which is an archival museum quality barrier paper. People often just use any regular sheet of clean paper and it essentially achieves the same purpose. You'll notice that I don't always use this parchment paper underneath my hand. I only do this sometimes when I remember. I'm not strict about it. But if you're creating an artwork that you intend to sell, then you might want to use a piece of protective paper like this as part of your regular working process, because when oils from our skin are deposited onto the paper, it can degrade the paper over time. When you draw with colored pencils, especially Prismacolors, tiny bits of the colored pencil core will crumble onto your paper. Although it's tempting to gently sweep away this tiny bit of debris with your hand, the problem is that no matter how gentle you try to be, there's always a chance that the pressure of your hand could accidentally press these little particles into your paper and leave unwanted marks as you're wiping them away. Another temptation is to simply use your breath to blow away these little particles, but the danger of blowing on your paper is that tiny little flecks of saliva could land on your paper and create a small stain. So it's best to avoid these two methods and instead either use a soft brush to gently sweep away those little colored pencil crumbles, or use an air blower like photographers use to blow dust off their lenses. I've been using this cute little unicorn brush, but you can use any soft clean paintbrush or a makeup brush. A good eraser is a really handy tool to have when using colored pencils. I really like this Tombow Mono eraser. It's shaped like a pen, so it's easy to hold, and the eraser is really small and thin, so it's perfect when I need to precisely erase tiny areas. As the eraser starts to wear down, you just click on the opposite end and more of the eraser comes out. Plus, the erasers are refillable, so you can use this handy tool again and again. When I need a stronger eraser or need to erase a larger portion of my drawing, then I love using this cordless Sumo Grip electric eraser by Sakura. It erases colored pencils much more thoroughly than a manual eraser. Although just be aware that depending on how much colored pencil is on your paper and how heavily it's been applied, an electric eraser still might not be enough to remove all of the pigment from the paper. There are other eraser options out there, like kneaded erasers and plastic erasers, but the Tombow Mono and Sumo Grip are my two current favorites that I keep reaching for whenever I need to erase colored pencil. The human eye is naturally attracted to contrast, which is why it's such an important ingredient if you want to create a truly striking work of art. We talked earlier about establishing your values in your main subject, so for this tip, I just want to show you a super easy way to create even more contrast by adding a black background. I'm using a black Copic sketch marker to carefully color in the background behind the rainbow rose. Alternatively, you could also use acrylic paint, acrylic ink, India ink, watercolor, gouache, or colored pencil to color in your black background. I did mention in tip number 5 that you should avoid black when creating realistic colored pencil drawings, but in that case, I was referring to the main subject of the artwork. For this drawing, I didn't want the background to be realistic. I just wanted the rose to be floating there in empty space, in which case, adding a black background is an effective way to create the ultimate contrast. Adding a black background isn't appropriate for every drawing, of course, but if the concept does work with the subject and style of your artwork, then adding a black background can really make the whole thing pop. It helps separate the foreground from the background. Notice how the black background frames the entire rose, creating even more of a focal point that directs your eye to the colorful rose in the center of the paper. Which version do you prefer, the white background or the black background? Let me know in the comments. This is actually the first colored pencil video that I've posted here on YouTube, so if you'd like me to create more colored pencil videos, let me know in the comments below. If you want to learn how to combine colored pencils with alcohol markers to create realistic art, check out this video where I demonstrate how to draw realistic cherries. See you there!